The first phase of the API lifecycle we're going to explore is the design phase. In that phase, we will see how we can leverage the Visual API Designer to actually lay out our API. Once we do that, we'll turn on our mock service and see how from that API spec, we can actually provide a simulation of that API with a mock endpoint that will allow my consumer to explore the API. From there, we'll see the API console is built into the product and allows you to explore, so you don't need to use an external product like Postman or something like that. And finally, API notebooks allow you to help the consumer of the API learn how to use that API. So let's flip over to the Design Center. Design Center is part of the Anypoint platform. We're going to click on the Design Center. It's loading up the ability to design APIs as well as to design flows, which we'll explore in a later module. First thing we want to do is to search for an API. So we could search, for example, our customer API. And we see we've just got a generic fragment out there as well as our customer data type. So I want to create an API spec, and we're going to call this my customer API for my SQL. We're going to use the Visual API Designer to create this. So it then loads up the API Designer. We see that it prompts me to leverage a tutorial. So instead of presenting you with a blank slate, we're going to help you design those APIs. So we can click on Show Me down here, and it'll walk me through those steps. So first thing is, let's load in a sample. So we click on Load in the example, and it loads in that customer API that we created. Now we can start configuring this. So we could say, this is great doc that goes here. And we see over on the right side, it's filling that in as the description. So we store our specs in RAML format. And on the right side of that, you see how we are educating the consumer on how to build these. Now, we also support OAS as well. So if you prefer that, you can use OAS. But we're storing these as a RAML spec. And I can configure all the different components in here. But we're going to follow through the tutorial. So when I click on Customers, you see it walks me through now and says, select the Post tab and review the body below. So now when we come down here, we see that I do have my media type set to application JSON. And the type is an object. And we can leverage the different types that are out here. So we're inheriting that data type from earlier. And so we can go through now and publish this out to Exchange, which would make this available out there. But let's explore a little bit more. I've got my post up here, but you also see on my get, I've got a 200 out here where I'm going to do a get, and it's going to return a contact data type that I have out here. And that contact allows me to provide an example as we see down below, which I could fill in. I could add additional response codes out here, like maybe I wanted to add in a 404, and I could add the description that I have in that, and then be able to extend out and see what am I going to do when I have a put, what does the body look like. Again, drop that down and see when I do a put, I'm going to send in that same contact that I'm dealing with. So the Visual API Designer allows me to go through and create that API that I have out there. Now, if I want, I could always flip into the RAML side of this and look at what does a full-blown spec look like without the visual side of it, and more experienced developers would choose to do that. But from this point, you see I could also turn on this mock service that now allows me to come out here and leverage. Remember, we have that built-in ability to execute these methods on my different items out here. So I could click on, I want to do a get on this. We see it has the 200 and the 400 that we added into it. Now I could click on try it. When I click on try it and send, I get back a sample response. So without me having to hop out to Postman, I can explore this API within here. Now, the next step and the final step to creating my API is to publish this out to Exchange and make it available to the consumers. So what we're doing now is we published it to Exchange. When I come out to Exchange, we say I've got my customer API for MySQL listed. If I went out to the assets page in Exchange, then we'll see it's listed along with all the other assets that are part of my enterprise that I could come out here and search for. But if we go back into my customer API for MySQL, there's a couple other things that we want to do. One is we definitely want to add in some more documentation. So our good doc goes here. And we can insert graphics and header pages and separators and all that kind of stuff, but we'll just save that page as is that's out there. Now, the next thing I'd want to do is to come in and add a new page, and we'll call this my notebook for my customer, or get customer by ID. So, and what we're going to do in here is tell the developer how to use this. So the first thing you need to do is make a connection. And now I insert a notebook, and we're doing it in markdown mode at this point, but I could flip over to my visual mode and get a little better view of this. So here we see I generated my connect on this, and when I click on play, it will execute that command, and it comes back with a 0 in this case. Next, you can call the get. And now I would come down here and I can type client.customers.byID and then do my get, and I'm going to provide a 1. And when I click on play, now I will get back a sample request that came from that same mock service that we hit earlier. So now I've instructed the developer on how to be able to actually access this API. And I would do that for each method in my API so that I don't have to answer questions about that when developers are trying to consume it. And then I would republish this out, and now I have my API published into the environment.